Hello, bridge builders! I'm here with some exciting news. The first volume of interviews is now available on Amazon.com. The link can be found at eatlunchandboardgame.com. I promise that all proceeds from sales of this book will go right back into this podcast and channel. Whether that is new and better audio equipment for the podcast or video equipment for the YouTube channel, or even more games to review, the money will not be wasted. Click over to Amazon and get your copy of Eat Lunch and Board Game The First Course today. And thank you for supporting the show. Welcome back to Eat Lunch and Board Game. I'm your host, Adam Collins, and with me today is game designer Ellie Dix. How are you, Ellie?
I'm very well. Lovely to be here with you today.
This is my first interview across the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah, well, this is a good way to start. What can I say?
Absolutely. So I ran across your book in the library. The book is called The Board Game Family, and I found it strictly by going to the library and typing in the search engine board game, and up it popped. And
brilliant.
Yeah, and I said, you know what? I'm going to read this book. So the book is I guess the subtitle is Reclaim Your Children from the Screen.
Yeah.
And I don't have that problem with my 8-year-old. I have the problem of I don't have time to keep playing games with you.
Yeah. There's a section for that in the book.
There was as I got farther into it, and
when you've reclaimed them from the screen, what can you do with an over enthusiastic board game player?
Yeah. So over this the last year, we have played hundreds of games together, just he and I, and and so we're always looking for a good game with a solo variant to kind of
send him off for a challenge.
Exactly. Go sit over there and play. We found a couple really good solo variants. But I also loved how to get people involved and to kind of, I guess, convince them to try playing games.
Yeah, that's what it's really aimed at. I mean, there's loads in there for people that are already playing games. My background is in teaching and particularly in supporting schools in how to manage behaviour and create cultures of outstanding behaviour in schools. So I've learned a lot about behaviour, and so this sort of translates into the book in terms of getting the best sort of board gaming experience for your family. So there's loads in there for people that are playing lots of games, in terms of how can you have positive board gaming experiences and make sure they're not at each other's throats and flipping the table and everything. But there's also it's really designed for those people who aren't yet playing lots and lots of games and want to know what the benefits are and want to know how to start introducing it and how to really capture young people into board games, because actually it's really interesting. But I think adults are quite skeptical a lot of the time. Adults that aren't board gamers are quite skeptical about whether the kids are going to want to do that, and it's not until you start doing it that actually you realize this is something that teenagers want to do. And our own preconceptions as adults can get in the way of some really valuable family time. So that's what the book's about, a sort of roadmap to integrating board games into family life.
Right. And so I board game every day at lunch with my coworkers, and it was fun to read some of the ideas because I have used some of those on my coworkers as so where I worked was very I guess the word would be like siloed and segmented. Like, if you're in this group, you're in that group, and if you're in that group, then you're over there,
and you don't mix.
And so we've really used board games to kind of break down those barriers, and as I like to say, build the bridges, right? And they've really been very great bridges that we've built and helped tear down a lot of those silos. And it's been interesting because we took it campus wide, and there's board game nerds everywhere. You just have to find them. And if you
Yep.
just kind of broadcast, hey, we're going to play board games at the campus cafeteria, people are like start showing up, and then people kind of keep
Yeah.
looking like, what are you doing? And then
Yeah.
they join the email list, and then we start having this huge email list, and then we've got people staying after work to play. So
It's
it
one
was
of
it
those,
was good.
it's a hobby that's often behind doors as well. So you, unless you have a conversation with somebody about board games and you happen to find, oh, you're both mad on board games, you won't necessarily know. I mean, it's not like people who are playing football or something turning up in a certain kit or going and practicing together or whatever. It's very different. It usually happens in people's houses. So yes, so having things in more public spaces, or at least in workspaces and school spaces, is a way to for people to connect who are already playing, and of course to
Yes,
invite more people in.
absolutely. So at my office, I actually had two different foreign editions of Catan. People that go abroad find a Catan and then bring it back to me. So I have foreign editions of Catan that were sitting on my shelf in plain view of everybody. And we brought a new division into my building. And as they were giving the tour to the new people, they were like, "That guy's a board gamer." And I'm like, "Yes, I am." So how did you get into gaming?
Oh man, well, from a young age.
There's nothing wrong with that.
No, so I was lucky, I guess, because in a time when most families were just playing the game of life and Monopoly, my parents were introducing all sorts of other kinds of games to family life. So my mum was teaching maths to student teachers, and one of the things they did every year was, one of the tasks she would set them was to design their own board game. And she would bring these home for us to test, me and my sister, and then she would take me and my sister into the university and to give feedback to all the student teachers. And this is from when we were 6, 7, all the
Oh
way up
my
to when we were
gosh.
12. So I was used to kind of seeing board games in prototype, feeding back on
Oh
them, play
man.
testing them, and working with people on kind of development, even as a child.
Oh
And
wow.
they were both teachers, my parents, and they were looking for interesting ways to teach. And I remember one of the games that we had, that we played a lot. We've still got it. In fact, I don't know if you've ever heard of this game, but it did win the Spiel des Jahres in 1975. I think it was 75. It could have been 78. Railway Rivals.
I read about it in your book.
Okay, fine.
I'm trying
So,
to track it down.
well, good
My own
luck.
copy. Yeah.
Good luck.
That's what
We
eBay's
have
for.
we have 38, something like 38 maps across my family. Just ridiculous. There's so many different Railway Rivals maps in the family. It's brilliant. And so we were playing these quite obscure games that was created by a teacher, and I think my mum found it in some teacher's magazine, and she sent away a check in the post with her little form and got the copy back. And I was introduced to board games that way. And my dad was big into gamification, so he would try and make all sorts of boring tasks more interesting by throwing random numbers at them. So, oh, look, we've got a Sunday free. What should we do? We'll go for a walk. And we wouldn't just go for a walk. He'd write a computer program that would generate a random number, that would pull this random number, which would then correspond with a grid reference, and that would be where we go for our walk, right? So I I was very much kind of brought up in this world of crazy games and gamification, and we used to customize the games that we had. We used to create new cards for them. We used to put bits from one game, board from one game, and join it with components from another game. So even though I didn't know it was called game design, that's what we were sort of messing around with from an early age.
Well, now you are a game designer,
Yeah,
and your company is the Dark Imp,
right.
and he has got to be one of the cutest little mascots I've ever seen.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and so also I want to mention in the book, if you guys track this book down, guys, trust me. that in the book the dark imp hides throughout the book and pokes his head in randomly, and it's kind
Yeah.
of a
But
it's kind of a
the imp is everywhere, all through the games. I mean, the imp comes in every game, and in the games we have these the meeples are imp shaped. So
there you
and
go.
all the game boxes have got the imps on them, and the imps are
Oh
everywhere
man.
because everybody loves the imps, and it's a very deliberate choice. You know, I'm creating games for families, but primarily games for families with teenagers and pre-teens. So I'm thinking about those high school kids, middle school kids who might be pulling away from their parents a little bit, and we're trying to reconnect the family. So it had to be very deliberately had to be branding that would appeal to the parents who are paying and buying for the game, but also appeal to the kids that they're going to be, put in front of. I don't want anyone to look at a game and think, oh, this is going to be boring or this is going to be too childish. I wanted them to be pulled in. That's what the Dark Imp's about.
Well, and he definitely does that, I can tell you that. uh so also, your book, I want to keep mentioning it because it was just such a fun read. Throughout the book you have games that you suggest, and then in the back, you list them all again.
Yeah, and of
I've all
course that's going to go out. That goes out of date almost as quickly as it's written with the number of games coming out. But I did try and pick games that are many of them are hopefully going to have longevity.
the only one that I really wanted that I was unable to track down was Room 25.
Oh yeah, that's a good game.
And that game, that one just sounded amazing, as it's kind of an escape room where you're prisoners and yet somebody could be a guard, and the
And
one
it's
versus
yeah,
many.
exactly. It's sort of one versus many or two versus many according to how many people are playing. But it's sort of this semi-cooperative thing, and you don't know who the traitors are, and you're revealing rooms as you walk into them.
I
And I
Oh
came
my
across this
gosh.
game at the most brilliant game night or game day. It was in a convent in York, in the UK. We were there for the weekend, my son and I, and what do we do when you go away for the weekend? You look for the local board gaming groups and
I
the
do that
local
all the time.
yeah, and the local escape room. So we turned up at the convent where the local board gaming group meets for the whole day. It was brilliant. And that's where I was introduced to Room 25.
Oh my gosh. That's I So it's only available right now in from the manufacturer, which is in France, I think. And to ship it over to me was like going to be ridiculous. So I'm like, hopefully they kind of push it
Yeah.
back out a little wider.
Well,
And
people can get them from me, and I'm happy to do very budget shipping, which will take ages to reach you, but you will get it at some point. So
well,
whenever you
that's what we were talking about before we hit record.
yeah,
You sent me a copy of your book is on its way to me, and a
yeah,
copy of my game is on its way. It'll
exactly.
be interesting to see. They'll pass each
Yeah,
other somewhere and see which one gets there first.
let's see what happens.
So, um, if I was going to come over to your house, which would be not an easy drive for me, what game is currently sitting out on your table?
Right. Right now, it's right now is Maglev Metro. Have you heard of it?
Mm-mm.
It's sitting out on my table because I'm reviewing it for Tabletop Gaming Magazine, and it's what they've sent me to review this month. It's a pick up and deliver game. So Maglev stands for magnetic levitation.
Yes,
I
I did
was
see something
a
on that.
little bit disappointed that there's no magnetic levitation in the
That
game.
does that does feel like it should be there.
Right, I think it's a bit of a mistake calling it that. And honestly, the production quality is outstanding in this game. But still, you feel disappointed that the little metro trains don't levitate above the board. I mean, never before have I been disappointed about the lack of levitation in a game, but because they've called it that, I'm disappointed. I think that was a bit of a mistake, but the components are excellent. I need to play it a few more times. We've had a couple of games. As usual, I misread some of the rules the first time round, so
I can't even tell you. My son and I were playing a game, and we realized every time we played it, we messed a rule up. And I think now, 4 or 5 games in, I think we now play the game properly.
Oh, it's
But
so
it took us
easy
four
to
or five
do
games.
though. Because every time you're learning a new game, you kind of have to get the gist of it and just play it through and see what happens. And then you get to the end of the game and think, oh, well, that's a bit of a broken strategy. Maybe it's wrong.
Then
That's
you,
what
then you
has
find out it absolutely is
happened.
wrong.
I've
Yeah.
misread that completely. And also on my table at the moment, you'd find Quacks of Quedlinburg, because it's one of the few games that my husband will play because he's not a big board gamer, but he loves that one. And the other one that's almost always on the table is Terraforming Mars, because it's the kids' favourite game.
Well, that and you can't pack it up. It takes too long to pack it up.
We have all the expansions.
Yeah, one of my best friends has that game, and it literally just sits on a table
Yeah,
because packing it up takes way too long.
yeah. And I've backed the big box on the Terraforming Mars big box, which is, I mean, I never thought I would do this, but it's just a box. It's just a big enough box to put all the stuff in, and some souped up components. Some
Oh
proper
yeah,
nice
the
3D
little 3D
components.
printed, yeah.
I've never done that before on Kickstarter. I've never just backed something which isn't a new game in itself. It's just a bigger box for the games you already have.
Well, that yeah. Well, my friend backed that too. I'm waiting on it to arrive at his place, and then I'll go give it a shot over there.
Yeah, yeah. I'm
Uh,
sure it'll make the whole experience even better.
we'll see. So, do you board game at lunch?
No, because I board game all of, like, the rest of the time. When you're board gaming as a job, it would be kind of weird to do it at lunch as well. I mean, it is my job and it is my hobby too. So I will play games at any opportunity. But weirdly, I tend to read at lunchtime. I board game all the other time, and then I read at lunchtime.
I get it. I get it. I read. I mean, well, that's how I came across you is
Yeah.
reading.
Oh, there you
So let me ask the contentious question: how do you pronounce Klaus Teuber's game, The Settlers of
go. Catan.
Catan? Ah, see now.
Catan, not Catan. Catan. I'm British.
Sure.
Catan. Yes.
At least it's not Catan. You know. One of my other favorite questions is if you had a lunch, since you don't, but if you did board game on a lunch hour, a full 60 minutes, what is your go-to 60-minute game?
Okay. I don't know if it's a go-to game because I play so many different games, but I suppose I'd pick out something like photosynthesis, because I still think it's brilliant the way that it
No,
works,
it's
and it's beautiful and it's interesting, and every game's different, and I love the trees growing. I'm a sucker for a pretty game.
no, it's a very pretty game,
Yeah,
very pretty. So a lunch half hour, a
yeah,
30-minute game.
yeah. I'm really loving Trails of Tucana. Have you played
Oh,
that one?
I'm not familiar with that one.
It's a flip and write game, so it's got cards. The
Sounds right up
card,
my alley.
yeah, it's absolutely brilliant. You can play with any number of players. It's simultaneous play, so everybody's active on every turn. Everybody uses the same flip of the cards. When you flip the cards, it shows 2 different kinds of terrain out of 4, and some of them appear more often. And you have to draw a line, so a route between those 2 different terrain types in adjacent hexes on your map. And that's what you do on a turn. You draw one line between 2 hexes on the map. And you go through the deck twice. After the end of the first round, you're doing a scoring round, and you're scoring all these special little icons that you are trying to connect to points around the edge of the board, which are villages. Yeah, and then you score again the second time through the deck, and you get points for being the first one to connect 2 of the same type of village. You get lots of points for connecting these special icons to the villages, and it's really fun. It's a network builder. It's quick and it's fun.
No, I'm gonna have to track that one down because like with all the Zoom calls and the Teams calls and all the video conferencing, my buddies and I have really taken to rolling rights and flipping
Yeah.
rights
Yeah.
because, as long as somebody has the deck and everybody's got the score sheet.
Yeah. Just hold them up, or indeed with this game, you can just say water to mountain. You don't need to hold the cards up even. So it works really well. I got it
Yeah.
at Essen 2019, which was the last Essen there was, and yeah.
Something happened in 2020.
Yeah. Hopefully, we'll be back this year.
I hope. I'm really looking forward to getting the board gaming convention scene back up and running.
Definitely.
So, what would your hidden gem or guilty pleasure game be?
Hidden gem has got to be Railway Rivals, probably, because it's still, it's a good game. It's a bit out. It's a bit dated, but also there's a game I don't know how you define hidden gem. Like, this is about 1100 on Board Game Geek, so it's not really hidden. But I'm surprised it didn't get more. It's quite new, and I think it's going to sort of fizzle out. It doesn't seem like, I haven't heard anybody talk about it. It's called Paris, La Cité de la Lumière. Have you heard of it?
No.
It's a 2-player game, tile laying. It's really fun. I really like it. But I haven't heard anybody else talking about it. I haven't heard it mentioned anywhere. It's quite encouraging that it's at 1100 on Board Game Geek, because people clearly like it, but I haven't heard anybody talk about it.
Interesting. So earlier you talked about backing Terraforming Mars big box on Kickstarter.
Yeah.
And I know that you're also a Kickstarter creator.
I am.
You just had Uranus.
Yep, Uranus.
Uranus. I don't know how you say it over across the pond.
We say Uranus, and that's why I called it that. Because
I'm all for it.
It just makes people laugh. I have the best review videos for Uranus because all these grown men can't stop laughing about the game name. And I made this brilliant compilation, 4-minute compilation, just with people sniggering and about the game name.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really
That's awesome. Oh, so you're a Kickstarter backer and creator, so that's exciting. It's a great way to get involved in the board gaming community. There's always good stuff out there.
Yeah.
I find myself at times telling myself I can't back anymore. I've got too much out there.
But I think that one of the things that actually makes a huge difference to small creators. So I do back things like Terraforming Mars, and obviously they don't need me as a backer because they are huge. But I also try and back a lot of projects from smaller publishers. And even if you don't want the game, just backing at the $1 level or the £1 level, whatever the currency is, makes a huge difference to small publishers because, Kickstarter's a search engine. It helps other people find it. It gets up the rankings. It allows you to communicate with those people. As a small publisher, it kind of gives you permission to send them updates and keep in touch with them. And it gets you a relationship with all those backers that you might not otherwise do. So I think that I'm very pro, just going around and just giving people $1 here and $1 there, and just to keep in touch with people, really.
Yeah, I like to go and back at the print and play level.
Yeah,
on a lot of them.
Yeah,
because $3, $4, $5, you get the print and play. I've got gigabytes of print and play files. I won't even try to tell you how many games I've got and versus how many I've actually printed off. It's sad. My friends make fun of me. I've got a file folder here next to me that is pages thick of print and plays I've printed off, and I haven't I haven't put together yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. Getting out there and making the connections is huge, especially in our industry. Making the connections it's priceless. Like getting to know people, going to your library and Googling or doing a search for a board game, and then you wind up meeting people across the ocean.
But I think one of the wonderful things about the board game community is that it's so open and it's so inclusive, and actually people are genuinely happy to connect with you almost all the time. And
Yeah.
it's a great industry to be in. It really is. It's a very supportive place.
Yeah. So I want to talk. I do throw game nights with my friends, and at the end, towards the end of your book, you described a weekend long game called Murder.
Yeah.
I cannot wait
It's
to
so
unleash this game on my friends and family.
it's brilliant.
So, can you describe it real quick for people who are
Yep.
not familiar with the game?
Okay, so it can last a weekend. It's good. A weekend is good. Is a good length of time for it.
Yeah.
You can play it in a shorter length of time. So if you're only together for an afternoon or something, you can. But you find that you can't be as creative and surreptitious as you would be over a weekend. So what you do at the beginning of the weekend is you put all the names of everybody that's there. So it works when there's a lot of people best. So you put all the names of everybody at the weekend in a big hat, and then you write the same number of locations in a hat. So if you've got 12 people, you're going to find 12 different locations in the house or grounds. So you might have the garage, you might have the den, you might have by the front door, something like that. And then you're going to put 12, if there's 12 people, same number as people as things. You're going to write different items. So it could be toothbrush, or you could have candlestick. You could have tent peg mallet or something. And you're going to put all of those in another jar or hat or something. And then each person is going to pick out one piece of paper from each hat. And that's what their objective is. So they're trying to, so they might get Auntie Alison in the shed with the rolling pin, right? And so you have to, at some point, give Auntie Alison a rolling pin in the shed. And if you manage to get her to take the rolling pin in the shed, then you say, "Ha ha, you're dead." And that's how you punish them. And then you take the pieces of paper that other player was trying to accomplish, and you have a second objective, and the other player unfortunately is dead and is now just watching the fun.
Oh man.
You could start a side game with all the dead people at a certain point in the weekend.
When I read that, I love how you say, like, towards the end of the weekend, nobody's taking anything from anybody.
Right. Nobody.
Yeah.
Pass me the salt. Nope. Nope. Not doing it.
Hey, can you
everybody's
hand me
walking
that?
around with their hands up.
Hey, can you bring the dirty dishes off the table?
Nope.
Nope.
Do it yourself.
Those dirty dishes are going to find their own way from the table over to this sink, because I'm not picking that bowl up.
Exactly. You have to do things like trip, like have a really dramatic trip in front of somebody, throwing whatever you've got in your hand away. And then the reflex is that they catch it and try and stop you falling, and then you're dead.
I read across that and I was like, oh my gosh, this is totally what I'm going to do. I can't wait. I told one of my friends about it. He's excited for it. I told my wife about it. She thinks it's hilarious. I can't wait to do it. I read across that in the book and I was like, this is brilliant.
It's a good one.
I like it. So one of the other things I wanted to talk about was at the very beginning of the book. Actually, it's in the introduction, I think. So before I even really started reading it, was that it talked about playing games improves memory formation, cognitive skills, increasing processing speed. There's so much good stuff that happens because of board gaming.
Right.
And me being the nerd that I am, it took me forever to get through these, 3 pages, because I kept hitting your footnotes and going and watching the TED Talk and going and reading the article. And I'm like, man, I'm never going to get through this book. But once I got through the introduction,
there are more footnotes in the introduction than anywhere else. Because I was writing these things knowing absolutely that they were true, and then the publisher was saying, but where's the evidence? I'm like, oh man, it just everybody, you know this if you play board games. So I was going to find the evidence after knowing the thing, which was quite interesting. Yeah, I was a teacher, and then I ran an education company for 20 years. And one of the really interesting things that happened to me was, so we lived in Spain for 5 years, and our oldest son, who's now 18, spent his first 3 years of schooling in Spain, and then came back. When we came back to the UK, he went into a class where, of course, everybody else had had 3 years of schooling in the UK, and he couldn't at that point write. He could speak English. He couldn't write or read English because he was writing and reading in Spanish. And so at the end of that first week of school, I was called in, and she did say a few things about, like, he's writing phonetically like you would in Spanish. And I was, yeah, well, that's normal. But one of the things she said is, you play lots of board games at home, don't you? And I was like, well, yes, but how did you know? Has he been talking about it? And she said no. And at this stage, I was not working in board games. I hadn't told her about that we play board games. She just said, I just can tell, because children that play lots of board games approach learning in a different way. Problem solving, sort of being a bit more experimental in, logical thought and systematic working, and not worrying if you can't do something, like not worrying if you fail at something because you're used to losing in games, and just, if you don't get something right the first time, kind of do it again and try it in a different way. And yeah, it's the decision making, it's all of these different things that you do when you're playing a game, because you're trying to win that game, right? You do it because of the victory condition of that game. You don't do it because you're trying to learn about that thing. That's why it's so powerful as a tool for learning, because you're involved in the game and you want to beat the game, so you get better at these different things and develop all these skills. And these, of course, I'm just talking about any game. I'm not talking about specifically educational games. And there are, of course, educational games where the theme is designed to teach a certain aspect of the curriculum or something. But this is just with any game, all these different things: the visual spatial stuff, the communication between players, the strategy, the logic, the decision making. It's a lot. And of course, that's just the learning skills, and then there's all the other stuff as well, the kind of the social skills, the getting used to failure. There's so many things, so many benefits of playing games in terms of the relationships with people and all sorts.
Yeah, my son really is big into chess.
Yeah.
And I'm terrible at chess. I can make the pieces move, and I was able to beat him a lot when he was learning chess, just because I knew how to make the pieces move better. But now I just try to hold my own for like 10 minutes. Like,
yeah.
if I can just last 10 minutes with him, I feel like I've accomplished something. But yeah, he plays a lot of games with me. He's probably my number one. Well, he is, especially according to my nerdy app where I track my gaming. He's my number one playing opponent. But you can, like you're saying, you can see, he loses, and it's like, okay, well, time to shuffle up and try again.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because this is the biggest reason that many families report for not playing games, because the children can't cope with losing, or a child can't cope with losing, and it's enough to stop people playing completely. And it's a real shame. And of course, there are lots of, and I've written blogs about this and done videos about this. There are all sorts of things you can do to try and help a child who can't really cope with losing a game. And it's normal. It's because everything that they're doing all the time is about being right. At school, they're trying to get things right, and they're maybe not comfortable with that failure. And of course, you've got to get children used to that so that they can learn from it. But I think it's really sad, actually, that sort of response is what stops lots of people playing. And they're probably playing, stupidly long games like Monopoly, where, when you lose, you've been losing for hours and it's desperate. So, one of my top tips for anyone in that situation is play games where it's not obvious who's winning all the way through the game. Play
Right.
games like we've talked about Trails of Tucana, for example, where you're playing on your own map. Nobody can see. You don't even have to tell anyone what your score is. You don't even have to count up your score if you don't want to. Play games where the scoring is disconnected from the gameplay, and then you can build in something like half an hour or longer between the playing of the game and the scoring, so that you've got, so that it's not about the gameplay, that the
Yeah.
scoring is different, and then you start to focus the child much more on what it's like to be enjoying playing the game.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I knew I was in trouble when he was like 3 and he was already playing King of Tokyo with me and
Yeah.
beating me. Um, and then when he was probably still 3, maybe 4, he was playing Monopoly Junior, and he looks at me. He's like, "Dad, there's no strategy to
No.
this," and I'm like,
No
"Oh,
choices. Yeah.
well, you're a bit young to say there's no strategy, but you're right."
Yeah.
And so now with his sister, she's 2, so we're working with, Candyland and just matching colors and moving along the board and, snakes and ladders or shoots and ladders or
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it, wherever you're
Yeah.
from. And just counting and stuff like that. And, he's like, "Oh, these games are boring." I'm like, "Buddy, you played these games to
Yeah.
learn how to
Have
count,
to
to
play
learn how to
games.
match colors." Yeah.
And
And
just to
now,
learn how, it's your turn, and you are a color,
yeah.
you are moving, and this is how you hold a set of cards.
Yes,
All
we had the little
the card
holder
holders.
where you could, like, yeah, because we were
Like,
playing Uno.
yeah, a good tip for that is, if you don't have those card holders, 2 Pringles lids with a sort of tack in between them. One of those brass tacks. You can make
Yeah,
your own if you put them like that.
awesome.
Yeah,
I never thought of that. But yeah, we
a
had a
life
little
hack.
card holder. We had a little card holder because we played a lot of Uno. Right now, our latest obsession is playing these old games. So we learned how to play backgammon.
Yeah, I love backgammon.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We play each other in backgammon a lot. And our newest one is cribbage.
Yep.
Um, it's a what you can do with just a deck of cards is insane.
Oh God, yeah, completely. I I think that just a deck of cards is a wonderful thing, and I will always have one in my handbag because
That's what.
yeah,
Yeah,
I never want to be without the cards. There's so many things you can do with them.
yeah. I'm gonna put a deck in my car because I never want to be without a deck of cards. After reading your book, I'm like, I should keep a deck of cards in the glove box
There's
of
so
my
many
car.
games you can play. But
Oh man.
I created a game, the one that came to Kickstarter just before Christmas. Well, September. It was a Christmas delivery. So
It's a
I did
tight
it.
turnaround.
It was a tight turnaround, but what I did was I said this is UK only. Now that didn't stop US backers backing it and saying,
We're not
"Come
that
on,
bright.
where's
We didn't. We
my
didn't read. We didn't read the whole thing.
no, you didn't read it. It's just UK only." But I thought this is my first Kickstarter. I'm going to do something. I know that one of the biggest problems with Kickstarter is shipping. I'm going to make it as straightforward for myself as possible. So I did that. But the reason I did that, it was I know in the States most people don't know what a Christmas cracker is, and that's the other reason I did it as a UK only thing. A Christmas cracker is a sort of tube with a firecracker type thing inside, and
Oh,
you pull both ends. One person pulls one end, another person pulls the other end. You do it at the Christmas dinner table, and inside then drops out into the gravy or somewhere a paper crown of the
yeah.
thinnest paper possible, like it's going to break before you can get it onto your head.
It usually does.
Yeah, and then a joke, terrible joke, and then a crappy plastic toy, usually actually something like a golf tee or or a hair grip or something, just rubbish, just total rubbish. And everybody's really excited, and it's like this institution, and then it's really disappointing always. So I thought, well, these cause so much mess, and they're so un-eco-friendly. So I thought, right, I'm going to make a giant cracker with 6 games in it. And so it's not really pulled, it's sort of twisted open, this cracker. And then inside there's lots of components. Now there's a deck of cards, it's a custom deck, but it's very much designed to be like a standard deck of cards, and you can create all sorts of different games from it. So it's got 36 cards in 6 numbers, 1 to 6, 6 suits, 6 colors, and then 6 different borders. So there's these different combinations of cards, and in the game, in the Cracker, there are 6 different games you can play with these components. So there's also some cubes. There's the imp meeples. There's some little component screens that you can hide stuff behind, and there's 6 rule sets. And they're all 6 completely different games. But also, there's a little booklet with the Kickstarter things about, with the Kickstarter pledges, that was a sort of game design challenge. So the idea is that you're going to use these components to create your own games and design your own games. And I've created 6 for you, but there's so many more that you can create. And I had 25 different challenges set by 13 different designers in this little booklet, which is now available online if you want to see it. Yeah, as a PDF, awesome. You can just look at. Yeah, it's really cool. So I think that, you know, that the cards have really inspired me from a game design point of view, because it's just that there's just endless possibilities for what you can do. And there's so many, if you think about it, there's so many games, brilliant games, that are just consecutive numbered cards, right? There's like No Thanks, for example, that's just, you know, 3 to 35 and some little tokens. And there's interesting decisions in that. There's The Mind, which is up to 100, I think. And that's just some weird cooperative mind reading game. And then there's Sechs Nimmt, which is that, or Take 6, which is that one where you're completing rows and you're putting the next number up and everybody's selecting a card together and you've got to place them in numerical order in lines. And that's very strategic. And they're all completely different, these games, but they're all just cards with numbers on. And I find that so fascinating, that there's so much rich gameplay from such really simple components. And that's why you always have to have a deck of cards with you. You never know what you might come up with.
Yeah. Well, we were cleaning out the basement and kept finding more and more decks of cards. And my wife was like, "You don't need any more decks of cards." I'm like, whoa. You can. I had a Star Trek deck of cards. I had 2 or 3, maybe 4 or 5 different James Bond. I'm a huge James Bond fan, so I've got at least 3 different James Bond decks of cards. Yeah. We found some X-Men decks of cards and Batman decks of cards. Yeah. And in the end, I don't know if I even had like a standard Bicycle or Hoyle deck of cards. And so we found one. Actually, my wife was a teacher, and so she had decks of cards for something she was teaching, and we found an unopened pack. And that's like the deck that my son and I have been using for cribbage, because we knew the whole deck was there. There was nothing special to it. But yeah, I mean, there's books and books just on games you can play with just a standard 52 cards plus 2 jokers and go.
I'm very privileged to call a complete game. There's a guy called David Parlett, who, if you've got any books on, so he's a games historian and a games inventor, and he's really interested in card games, and he's written a lot of the Penguin book on card games, the Penguin book on patience games, all sorts of stuff like that. I'm very privileged to call him one of my friends, and met him at a convention where we were both speaking on a panel where we were sort of doing a rundown of the last 41 years of the Spiel des Jahres quickly, in sort of an hour, and going through all the games and work out which was the best Spiel des Jahres game. And he was on the panel because he has won a Spiel des Jahres, which is a much better claim to fame than why I was on the panel, which was that Spiel des Jahres is about family games, right? And people know me as somebody who is interested in family games. So, so he won the first Spiel des Jahres for his game Hare and Tortoise, which is still a fabulous game.
It's fantastic.
From 1979. It's still brilliant. We play it often because my son really loves it.
Yeah, I don't own that one, but I have played it. I love it with your betting the carrots and
Yeah.
moving, and it's a
But
lot.
if you
It's
want
a
a
great game.
really crazy game, just using a set of standard playing cards, look up Gooseberry Fool, which is one of David Parlett's games created for just a standard deck of cards. You end up with, I think you only have 33 cards that you use from the deck, and it's for exactly 3 players. You must have 3 players, and you're always trying to be in the middle. It's absolutely crazy. So if you are the odd one out, you get to go forward. You get points, but you never want the most points. You want the middling points. So it's really, really difficult, and it's completely chaotic, and it's brilliant fun. It's really hard to have a proper strategy in, because it's so difficult to work out how to be in the middle all the time. But it's very different from other card games. It's a trick taking game, but it's very fast paced and silly. It's worth a look.
I'll have to definitely try to track that one down, because we do tend to have, if we can talk my wife into playing, we do have 3 of us.
Okay, you can just find it online. It's on his website.
My wife comes downstairs last night and she's like, "You want to play that Miles game?" We're like, "The Miles game?" Then we realize she's talking about Milborns, or however you properly say it. I probably butcher the crap out of it.
Brilliant.
But yeah, so we sat down and played that last night. That's one of our top 3-player games that we play all the time. The game is, like I said, I read a lot. I read a book that was like listed all these games, and that one's about car racing. And my son really likes cars and board games, so we tracked it down, which just turned out just going to the game shop down the street. They had a copy sitting there. It was collecting dust. Literally, I dusted it off to go buy it. And we've already played it over 20 times.
Wow.
Such a great game. And so then we got the wife involved, so now we have, we can play more. But yeah, I'm gonna have to definitely track this other one down, and anything we can play with 3 players is a blast. So.
Well, you can just Google it and play it with, it's on his website. You can just play it with standard cards. So easy.
Excellent. Well, Ellie, I would like to really, really thank you for being on my show today. This has been
great.
This has been great. I love it. If anybody wants to reach out to you, how can they do that?
Well, you can find me through my website, which is thedarkimp.com, through the contact page. I'm on Twitter at Ellie Dix Tweets. I'm on Facebook and Instagram at The Dark Imp.
Yeah, I think I tracked you down through your website, The Dark Imp. Like I said, oh man, he's just the cutest little guy that made reading the book. I already loved the book, but made the book even more entertaining reading through it, and seeing him like poking his head out from the, between the pages and stuff like that. So I loved it.
I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah, it was fantastic. And as usual, you can reach out to me via Facebook at facebook.com/eatlunchandboardgame, or email me at eatlunchandboardgame@gmail.com. And remember, board games build bridges.
Average Joe's Gaming is a weekly podcast brought to you by us. I'm Joe.
I'm Tom. We talk about all things game-related. In this hour-long podcast, you'll discover what has arrived in the game room,
which Funko Pop Tom just could not resist, and maybe, if you're lucky, we might get around to talking about games.
Might.
Tune in weekly. You can find us on all of your favorite podcast formats.
Stay in tune with all things sports around Indiana and the nation with the Crash Course Podcast. Each week, we tackle the big storylines from the world of the Colts, Pacers, and the Indiana college scene, while also keeping a pulse on the nation. We record live weekly at twitch.tv/3C Media and can be found on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts can be heard. You can catch the Crash Course Podcast.
When you're gaming, why not be comfy? Go over to supportplayer.org. Click on the cards, pieces, and dice to get some merch. These t-shirts are some of the most comfortable I have ever worn. That's supportplayer.org, and there's a link on eatlunchandboardgame.com.